Now, Pope Urban now has a tremendous fighting force. These Normans, they're on the warpath. And not only that, but they have certain interesting laws of inheritance. The Primogeniture law of inheritance, which was a man, a duke, a ruler, his firstborn son, his oldest son, is the one who inherits everything. Well, what about the second son? What if he had 3 or 4 sons? Well, the second son will then go into the army. The third son will become a priest. In other words, the power goes into the hands of the first son. Well, what about the second? Now you have an interesting opportunity. The Normans can go and conquer the lands that are ruled by the infidels and establish their own dukedoms and kingdoms and territories. So you have a lot of people who are commanding the armies of the Crusaders, and all of them are younger sons. The older sons are staying in Europe where they have their properties. The younger sons are going to make their fortunes. The other interesting thing about the First Crusade is in the First Crusade, the only people who go on the crusade are the Normans, the Frenchmen. As I said, there are many factors which go into this. You have the factor of the war and the powers that are on the warpath. You have the problem of the economy. And then there's another problem, and that is the problem of the Jews in Western Europe. And the Jews of Western Europe had lived, you might say, in comparative tranquility since the days of Pope Gregory the Great. So from 600 until the First Crusade, you have Jews living in all the lands of Western Europe. You have not only that, but you have a growth of Jewish centers of learning. You know the names of Rabbeinu Gershon Maor HaGolah, maybe you heard that name, Rabbi Gershon, the light of the exile, who had established a great school of learning on the Rhineland. And you have Rashi, the famous Rashi, who lived in France and in Germany. He was from the city of Troyes, or Troyes in France, and he also taught in Worms in Germany, and his reputation was very great. Now, these were great Jewish leaders, which means there were great Jewish communities established all over the area. Not only that, what was Rashi's source of income? He was not paid for his being a great scholar. Does anybody know what it is? Rashi was a Frenchman. He was a wine merchant. He was a vintner. He had vineyards. He made wine. The Jews were there. They were settled. They were in farming also and settled on the land. But there were many Jews living in the cities, and the Jews in the cities played a significant role in commerce and especially in banking. And in banking, they were, you might say that their role in banking was almost forced upon them in many ways, because just as the church, you know, it's interesting to follow this. When Paul says, you know, we don't need the Torah anymore, we don't need law, because now we're living in the age of love and eschatology and the kingdom of heaven and all of that. But as the church is ruling, it has to live by law. And so you have the emergence and the development of church law, based to a large extent, to some extent, on Roman law. And then there's the Torah, and the church begins to adopt laws of the Torah. In fact, what's interesting is if you ever read the correspondence on the affair of Henry VIII and his attempt to get a divorce, all the arguments are on the basis of the Torah and the role and the legitimacy of his marriage to Catherine in the first place. And they refer back to the law of the levirate marriage. You know, his brother was married and they didn't have children, so he had to. I mean, the whole thing is interesting. All the arguments are based on the Torah because you base it on the law that you consider significant.